webinar series on the topic of 15 years of advancing excellence in family philanthropy, lessons learned and a look ahead. Today we are joined by 4 past board chairs from the National Center for Family Philanthropy, along with our current board chair and founding CEO, Virginia Esposito, for a wide-ranging discussion on both past trends as well as future hopes and dreams for this vibrant and evolving field. My name is Jason Bourne, and I am Senior Program Director at NCFP. NCFP is the nation's only nonprofit dedicated exclusively to families who give and those that work with them. We provide the research, expertise, and peer learning opportunities necessary to inspire our national network of giving families on every step of their philanthropic journeys. Families in our network take advantage of our wide array of resources and advice to help make a positive and enduring impact on the communities they serve. Together, we make great things happen. This webinar is the latest in our series of monthly online learning sessions on important trends and topics in family philanthropy. As always, we want to extend a very special welcome to our friends of the family and our Leadership Circle members. Your annual support makes it possible for the National Center to provide preeminent research and expertise on the field of family philanthropy so that families have access to the resources they need to transform their values into effective giving. We also welcome our many Family Philanthropy Online subscribers to today's discussion. Please contact us after the call if you're not currently a friend of the family and would like to learn more about the exclusive benefits and services we offer this special peer network. Before we introduce today's speaker and topic, we'd like to tell you about our upcoming webinars. On Thursday, August 8th, we'll host a discussion on innovative and creative ways that community foundations and family foundations are working together, featuring representatives from the Orange County Community Foundation, the Keith and Judith Swain Family Foundation, the Community Foundation for Greater Atlanta, Minnesota Philanthropy Partners, and the MARDAG Foundation. On September 12th, we'll feature the topic of Igniting the Spark, Creating Effective Next Generation Boards, which is based on our just released Passages issue brief on this topic, which I'll be telling you a bit more about in just a few moments. And finally, on October 10th, we'll share a variety of stories and strategies from family foundations who have found creative ways to create board meetings that engage your board. You can register today at the National Center's website for these and other upcoming webinars, which as always are free for friends and FP Online subscriber communities. For those of you on today's webinar who have not yet signed up for our Friends program, please contact us after the call for more information at 202-293-3424. As I mentioned a few moments ago, we have just released an exciting new Passages issue brief for the field on the topic of Igniting the Spark, Creating Effective Next Generation Boards, developed by NCFP in collaboration with our colleagues at Youth Philanthropy Connect, a program of the Frida C. Fox Family Foundation. Igniting the Spark is now available for complimentary download from our website at www.ncfp.org, and you can also look forward soon to a series of case studies of family foundations who have used the Next Generation Board model to engage children, teenagers, and young adults in shared family philanthropy. It's a terrific new resource for the field, and we look forward to your feedback. Let me now quickly go over a few logistics for today's call, and then we'll get to our agenda and introduce our speakers. To ask a question during the webinar, simply use the question box of your control panel on the right side of your screen. For our social media users out there, we also invite you to chat with us on Twitter, both during and after the webinar, using our hashtag, #NCFPWeb. Our presenters are eager to hear your questions and suggestions, and we will do our best to fit as many of your questions and comments into the discussion as possible. Simply type your question in the question box, and we'll try to get it in. Finally, if you experience any technical difficulties during the call, please dial back in the number we provided or contact the GoToWebinar help desk at 1-800-263-6317. Please also note that this webinar is being recorded. Keep this in mind when sending in a question. If you wish to remain anonymous, simply indicate that in your note. I'm pleased now to introduce today's topic and speakers for our call. How has the field of family philanthropy evolved over the past 15 years, and where is it headed in the future? Today's wide-ranging conversation with NCFP President Virginia Esposito and the current and former board chairs of the National Center for Family Philanthropy will cover a variety of trends, issues, and ongoing challenges in family philanthropy. Our guest speakers will share their perspectives on which trends are gaining momentum and provide a glimpse of where the field might be headed. Joining us today in order of appearance to share their experiences into this ever-present topic are Thomas W. Lambeth, Senior Fellow and former Executive Director of the Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation, Mary Mountcastle, Board Member of the Mary Reynolds Babcok Foundation and the Z. Smith Reynolds Foundations, Carrie Avery, President of the Durfee Foundation and Board Chair of the National Center for Family Philanthropy, and Valerie Lees, President and CEO of the DonorsForum based in Illinois. Please join me in welcoming these longtime leaders in the family philanthropy field. I mentioned earlier that today's presentation is the 100th webinar in this monthly series. Today we are also celebrating NCFP's 15 years of advancing family philanthropy and supporting the many thousands of families around the country that are leaders in their communities and regions. Since our founding in 1997, NCFP has served as the nation's first and only dedicated voice for the value and importance of the family's involvement in philanthropy. We have showcased promising practices and effective approaches in our case studies and stories of hundreds of families in a variety of areas related to family giving, including governance, family dynamics, generational succession, leadership transitions, and much more. Our research and publications, including titles such as Family Foundations, A Profile of Funders and Trends, Splendid Legacy, The Guide to Creating Your Family Foundation, and Generations of Giving, Leadership and Continuity in Family Foundations, have helped to define the field while demonstrating both the scale and potential of family giving. And most importantly, over the past 15 years, we have supported tens of thousands of philanthropic families through various critical stages of transition, from founding to death of the donor, to hiring of your first outside staff, to transfer of board leadership across generations, to preparing for an influx of assets. One of our favorite moments occurs when an individual family member or founding CEO of a family foundation that we have worked with from day one accepts an invitation from us to share their own story and perspectives with the field, either through a webinar or a Family Giving News feature story or interview, or for one of our ever-popular Passages issue briefs. We are constantly on the lookout for new ambassadors to help us in our mission to advance effective and meaningful family philanthropy, and we thank the many of you in our audience today who have been an important part and really who have been at the heart of our work over the past 15 years. And for any of you out there that have not, don't worry, we'll be contacting you soon. With that in mind, let me share just a little bit about who it is that is in our audience today, and thanks to the more than 140 of you who answered our short set of poll questions. Our first question was, please indicate which of the following vehicles your family currently uses to conduct its giving. And as you can see, there's a wide variety of vehicles that are being used by those in the audience today, with family foundations being the most popular option, but a whole range of other advised funds, family offices, donor-advised family businesses, and corporate giving programs and other things. You can see that there's a great diversity in that. And we also know that many of you, if not most of you, use more than one of these vehicles for your giving. Our next question was, please indicate which of the following roles you play in your family's philanthropy. And again, we have a great diversity of the role that you play. We have a number of advisors, philanthropic consultants, or legal advisors, or other types of advisors. We have a fair number of staff, and we also have a fair number of both donors, family members, and board members on the call today. And finally, and most importantly for today's discussion, we asked you, what do you think are the 3 most important trends you feel are facing the field of family philanthropy? And I think this is really an interesting slide here. You can see that 4 out of 5 of you, more than 4 out of 5 of you, thought that one of the most important trends facing the field is next-gen donors bringing in their own different perspectives and interests. Geographic dispersion, half of you listed that as one of your top 3 trends. Increased use of data in giving, which has got a lot of coverage in the media over the last couple of years, is in there. And also a lot of other important trends are represented here. So thanks very much for providing your feedback about these questions. So thanks again. It will be interesting to see how the audience perspectives match up with our panel of experts today. I'm now delighted to introduce today's first speaker, NCFP founder and president, Virginia Esposito. Ginny has been the author, speaker, and lead researcher behind countless publications, research initiatives, and seminars on family philanthropy, and has served on a number of prominent national nonprofit boards during her more than 30 years of service advancing private philanthropy. Ginny is at the heart and soul of the National Center, and in many ways of the field of family philanthropy. And she's going to kick off today's presentation with a discussion of the 10 biggest trends in family giving, and then I'll leave it to her to introduce our other esteemed speakers on the call. Ginny, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jason. And Jason, let me tell you that it's a special privilege to be doing this call with you as our moderator, because if I was the first person in the door, Jason was the second, with great faith and great energy. And the National Center and me personally are very much indebted to you. Let me go through some of the trends that I have noticed over the last 15 years, at least things being markedly different than they were when we were first getting started. I'm going to introduce these very quickly so I can get all 10 in my allotted time. but happy to answer any questions, as I'm sure the other panelists are too. So the first trend that I want to talk about was reflected in yours and comments, and that's when do we involve the next generation? Now, when I first started in this work, people were talking about the next generation, and these were people in their 40s and 50s. When do we bring those people in? We were looking at much older adults, and there was this sense that if you brought these older adults in, then it must be time for the even older adults to move off. I'd say that what's changed about that is not just the vibrancy of bringing on the next generation, but a real attitude that multi-generational giving is where so much of the energy and the richness of family philanthropy evolves. Jason, are we okay with that slide? There we go. Okay. Multi-generational giving is, I think, the change that we've experienced. This is the notion that it is in that mix. What is the role for senior family leaders who may have more discretionary time? They're leading longer, healthier lives. How do you bring in younger people so that there are terrific new perspectives, that irreverent, questions can be asked? And it isn't this, as Alice Buell wrote in a paper for us some time ago, this mythical passing of a baton. It's all the generations seeing one another for what they bring to the table. The second is that when we first got into this, private foundations were certainly the default option. If you said you were interested in organizing your philanthropy, chances are your attorney made sure you got a private foundation. Now we look at multiple vehicles for multiple giving goals. As you saw from the slide earlier, donor advised funds, family office giving, family business giving, gift funds. There are so many different options that you have when you want to organize your giving. As Jason said, most everyone uses more than one. And frankly, you can now choose your vehicle based on what your goals are, how much you want to give, how much time you have, what you're looking for, what kind of network you're looking for. So that's been a real shift. The next is that when we first got started, people went looking to see if there were other examples or resources or consultants when they got into a difficult point with their philanthropy. Now we see a lot of people getting out in front of the transitions that their philanthropy is going to experience. We see people trying to anticipate change so that they can lead that change. We see many, many more things like retreats. When I first got into this work, and I recognize if I keep saying that, I'm going to sound like a dinosaur, but when I first got into this, retreats were very rare. Now people use them to really plan, to think ahead. Donors write ethical wills or donor legacy statements. There's a real sense of getting the help before things become too stressful. Another one early on was that most of the focus was on your grant making and your investment performance. They were really the priorities. I think now what we've seen is a much greater appreciation for the critical role of governance. Now I know a lot of this applies to those of you with the foundation option, but there's been so much more good information out there about how boards and those who are providing governance for philanthropy really do make sure that everything else runs well. As I say to so many families, if the governance is in good shape, chances are the other things are too. But you can work really hard at the others, and you can have a functioning grant-making program. But if you really want to get everything out of this, paying attention to governance, not just who gets on the board, but how that board functions, how that board assesses itself, et cetera, is so important to the long-term vitality. Another default that was written into the papers that you got when I first got into this was perpetuity was just the default option. Chances are very few of you, especially those of you either whether you're the post-World War II or anything up through the 80s, if this was established, your estate planners may not even have asked you the question about whether or not you wanted this to exist in perpetuity. But now, this is a more thoughtful decision, even though most of you still choose perpetuity, and not just for family foundations. Many of you with donor-advised funds have chosen a home for that advised fund with someone that allows multiple generations, if not all generations, to participate. But we're also seeing perpetuity as a mission-driven strategy. Is perpetuity something that's going to help you get done what you need? Does your programming mean that you want to be there forever for the issues of the communities you've chosen to serve, or does a more limited lifespan help you with that? The next one, we got a lot of questions about when do we staff, can we go outside the family? Now there's a real sense of what executive leadership means to a foundation or to a family office or business giving. And there's a sense of what the changing nature of that leadership has been. In the earlier days, I would say many people got their CEOs through their networks. And while that still happens, we're realizing that those networks have changed. One of the surprising findings of our CEO research was that many more families were choosing people who had been with grantee organizations they had funded. And the notion that you would pick a business associate or your former attorney or something had evolved into picking someone that you had worked with and you knew that their grant-making interests and expertise were aligned with yours. Then, you know, as much as possible for grant-making, how do we make sure that the investments and the payout are aligned so that, you know, when that money goes out the, door, we have as much as possible to give. That's still true now, but you really are seeing much more beyond grant-making. You're seeing the notion of the more for mission work, mission-related investing, the notion of advocacy, using your proxy. There's so much more you can do to influence your program and mission that people are taking advantage of many of those. Then, and I still think it's the temptation for many people, how to deal with family difference, how to deal with the fact that you don't live in the same place anymore, or you may have different politics, religions, spouses have made a difference. The focus was really on how do you deal with, survive, all of this difference. How do you manage difference? I think one of the things I've realized, especially for those of you who have been at this a while, that what the new issue is what makes us a family? What is the notion that we have something in common, whether it's a legacy of giving, whether it's a commitment to an issue or place, whether it's a set of values to which we can all agree on and leave the difference beyond that inner circle. But the focus is less on how do you accommodate difference than how do you develop a foundation, if you'll pardon the pun, but a foundation for work together. What makes this shared work? And I think for those of you that want to exist over a period of generations, that want to see new family members involved, this latter question, what makes us a family, what makes this a shared philanthropic endeavor, becomes very important work. Then family philanthropy was unplugged and unknown. There wasn't the kind of communication strategies offered by technology which we have today. There certainly wasn't a sense that philanthropy is better supported as a critical element of our democracy unless we do, unless we're better known, unless those we seek to serve, those to whom we are accountable, including the public, but those, that we want to support this incredible phenomenon, unless they know who we are and what we're contributing to our democracy. These days, we have a better sense of communications and technology. We have a better sense of how important it is to have strong communications within our families, within our foundation and advised fund and business families. But we also have a sense that it's important for others to understand us, and that our communication strategies, whether those are websites or reports on our grantees or video productions, that these all help enhance not only our own grant making, but the greater understanding of family philanthropy. And as some television show once said, and we have the technology. So we've got so many more tools than we had at our fingertips to be part of this work and to make sure others understand. And then I want to close with one I think is especially important for me. When I first got to the Council on Foundations in 1980, there was very, very little sense of the role of family in philanthropy. And even as the programs there got started, there was little sense of what family adds. There was a real sense that it was a hurdle to good giving. And one of the things that we who were advocates for this kind of giving really faced was this uphill battle of, well, family, isn't that something that makes it more difficult? Isn't that something that makes mission a problem or makes board governance a problem? I think where we are now is we've really done so much together to help people see how family adds value to philanthropy, how the passions, the loyalties, the commitments of donors and their relatives adds to philanthropy. And when we finish our question and answer period, I will be sure to come back to that one because I'd like to end. Let me now, though, end my own reflections and bring in that of several of the people who have been so important to this field and so important to me and the National Center. And briefly, I'm not going to do all of these highlights, but I do want you to know a little bit about them. And the first is Tom Lambeth. As I say, one of this field's really terrifically important, passionate, and courageous leaders. Tom was the founding chair of the National Center at a time when founding something dedicated to family philanthropy, as I say, there was a lot of uncertainty, if not concern. Tom is still the senior fellow at the Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation, and as I say, someone who was very, very important to getting the National Center started. Also on the call is our current, Mary Mountcastle. Mary is a trustee of and a family member of Z. Smith Reynolds, Mary Reynolds Babcok, and has served on the Triangle Community Foundation board in the past. Mary also has been one of our longtime chairs, and one of the things that we've really respected in terms of what Mary's brought to us is that sense of the grantees as partners and endgame in this work. She served as a senior fellow at Self-Help, knew a lot about community development lending. She's been on the board of Neighborhood Funders Group and others as well. And now on to our current chair, Carrie Avery. Carrie is the president and family trustee of the Durfee Foundation, based in Los Angeles. And Carrie has also been on the boards of the Grantmakers for Effective Organizations, Berkeley Repertory Theater, and currently is on another family foundation board, the RGK Foundation. And finally, and certainly not least, one of the real innovators in our field and certainly helped bring that spirit to the National Center, Valerie Lees, President and CEO of DonorsForum, that promotes philanthropy, both grant making and bringing the grantees in to an association that serves Illinois. Valerie started at the Otto Bremer Foundation, I was going to say in 1974, but goodness, Valerie, what a career you have had in so many different ways and on so many different boards, and I'm so glad that you could be here with us today. I would be remiss if I did not say that the only other board chair of the National Center, Curtis Meadows, also wasn't able to be with us today because of his own travel schedule. So let me start with each of you and kick off the question with what you think has been the greatest advancement or the biggest change in the field in family philanthropy over the last 15 years. And Tom, I will start with you, and then Mary, Carrie, and Valerie. So Tom, on to you.
I'm going to take a little bit longer to answer this question than you might want me to, Jenny, and then I'll take a little bit less time on subsequent questions. First, in thinking about this, it's occurred to me that this is not really a very long time. 15 years is not. It seems less long for me than it probably does to some of you young folks on the call. But it really is not that long. The other thing that occurs to me is that you're asking a question and some questions that the best person in America to answer is Jenny, who has done some of that already. But I sit here a little bit like feeling like we are talking about flood control and Noah is in the room. So let me say also that it occurs to me that maybe the most important thing that's happened is that we've demonstrated that there was the need for some special entity, some special center that dealt with family philanthropy. If you look at the sort of evolutionary events going back to when the council first started having committees dealing with family philanthropy up through the recent years, the fact that we have indicated that there was reason for and have validated that for doing what we're doing may be the most important thing. I also think immediately about the fact that all of this has happened in a kind of extraordinary time for philanthropy, because just as we were moving into what was told and it was going to be the greatest transfer of wealth in history, we also had one of the greatest economic setbacks of certainly the last half century. And all of that impacts on all of this. And I think that this has all occurred when there was also emergence of a new respect for the importance of accountability in philanthropy. And I think accountability has a special meaning in family philanthropy, because there's in a sense not only accountability to the public and to the kind of regulatory, legislative institutions to which we have to be accountable, but there's an accountability to the past. There's an accountability to donors. It's a special responsibility there for family philanthropy. And maybe what I think has been the great change, and I've been seeing most of this in the last decade, restricted to the state where most of my attention is focused, and that is the rise of a generation of philanthropists who are committed to being as entrepreneurial in their distribution of wealth as those who came before them were in creating that wealth, and perhaps that's one of the great changes.
Thank you very much, Tom. And now to you, Mary.
Well, I will be brief, and hello to everybody. I just, at the risk of stating the obvious, I think, and building on what Tom said, just the fact that there are organizations like the National Center and others who bring people together, and that people in philanthropy, and especially within family philanthropy, want to come together to ask ourselves and ask our colleagues hard questions about the work that we're doing, the impact that we're making, about our governance practices. And I guess I've noticed in the 20-plus years that I've been in this field a real willingness for people to be much more candid and kind of air the dirty laundry and see that as an opportunity for learning and not a weakness. And I really appreciate that. That's it.
Thank you. Carrie.
Yeah, well, I think for me, I look at the biggest change as that philanthropy is no longer seen as something that you do when you retire from your real work, that it's something that so many people that we've seen who have made their fortunes have decided at a much younger age than retirement age to turn to the real work of philanthropy, and that there's been a real explosion in giving while living and an increased interest in learning how to do it well. I also want to give a shout out to my region, which is the West, and to note that of the foundations that are up here on the slide, all of them are on the West Coast, and I think there's been a real rise in the prominence of philanthropy coming out of the West Coast.
Gary?
Oh, yes?
I'm sorry. All of a sudden you went silent on my phone. Did I interrupt you, Valerie? I apologize.
No, that's okay. I mean, I'll just jump in. I'm not going to go through all the points the bullets that I've got on this slide here, because I think everybody has touched on them. I think the last point that Carrie just made, I think is just one of the most exciting accomplishments, if you will, of family philanthropy over the years, is that so many living donors and increasingly younger donors are engaged in this work. I just want to do a shout out to Ginny and Tom, who obviously were so prescient back in the mid to late 90s, under changes that were taking place in the economy that were driving a lot of new wealth creation, and therefore driving a lot of new people to be donors and to want to be philanthropists and want to make a difference, but needed resources and help to do so. And then the only other thing I think I would say is the explosion of donor advised funds. In a sense, I think that this is a real democratization, if you will, of philanthropy. It gives these vehicles, often, as Ginny has said before, families who have foundations also have donor advised funds for a variety of reasons and different goals. But the bar is so much less, usually, to create a donor advised fund, and it just creates a whole community of givers and philanthropists, if you will, that didn't exist before, to really engage family in community giving. For me.
Thank you very much, Valerie. Now, Tom, you headed for many years a foundation that serves as one of the premier examples of place-based philanthropy, both because of your charter, but you have so much experience working with the people, the communities of North Carolina. Could you talk a little bit about how families balance place-based giving with increasingly geographically dispersed board and family members? What do you think made place-based giving special for your foundation, and how, any advice you have for others wrestling with issues of maintaining a commitment to place when the family may not all remain in that place?
Well, let me say first that I think place is important. I listened several months ago to the representative of a rather famous American family philanthropy say that he thought the reason his family had worked so well together in their philanthropy was that he could bring them together to meet and talk about it in places in which their family had lived. That's not possible for every family foundation, but it struck me that that's a pretty interesting insight into the meaning of place in family giving. I think that the fact that families now are not living in the state which their philanthropy may have originated, and in the case of the Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation, the commitment to giving within North Carolina as a result of a court involvement in settlement of litigation over a will, and it is a very enforceable restriction. And I don't think that's been viewed as a limitation on the family in the great sense of being able to do philanthropy well. And I think that the fact that there are now members of the family who live outside the state, in some ways, is an asset. It may mean you have to work in certain ways to make sure that they are up to date on the environment, the context that they're giving, the geographic context, but it also means that they bring to the decisions of the foundation some questions that might not be asked by people who did not live in other places. So I think the combination of the experience of the historic geography of the family is probably enriched by the kinds of questions and the kinds of answers that come from people who are living elsewhere. I do think it's something you have to work at if there is a geographic commitment, but I think there are ways for all of that to become not a liability. I think there just has to be some intentional effort at getting family members in the state involved in what's going on. But I also don't want to suggest that that's a terrific problem for at least the family foundations that I've had some insight into. There have been ways to do it. I think there have been ways to make a real asset out of the folks who ask the questions that are better informed from other parts of the country.
Thank you, Thomas. A wonderful way of looking at the advantages of both those who are close and those who aren't. Valerie, you serve as the head of a regional association of grant makers that supports both foundations and nonprofits, and in many ways that makes you a real hub for learning and for sharing innovations. One of the trends we're hearing about so much is this notion of how do you have impact with the other 95% of your assets. Regionally, are you seeing more conversations about PRIs, about mission-related or impact investing?
Well, absolutely, and I think this is one of the most exciting trends facing our field, and will, I think, over time change the face of support for social change. You know, we're fond of saying here in the Midwest that the East Coast and the West Coast are always ahead of us in terms of everything. And so now that the Midwest, or particularly Chicago, is experiencing this boom in social entrepreneurship, social enterprise, impact investing, I guess this is a good thing because it means that this trend is here to stay if the Midwest is finally on board with this. And we're seeing in our membership a lot of these new types of givers, new hybrid vehicles for giving. And we have a category of membership philanthropy advisors, and they tend to be mostly philanthropy strategy advisors or wealth advisors, et cetera. We created it around the same time that the National Center was created because we knew that a lot of the new philanthropists needed support and guidance in this new work. And they're bringing to us the appetite from their clients for learning more about using the other 95%, PRIs, mission-related investing, impact investing, and saying that families are now adopting a portfolioed approach to social change and using different vehicles to achieve different goals. So yeah, and I think this is just a really, really healthy trend we're seeing. I think the other part of that trend is very much driven by something that we've talked about already, and that is the multi-generational or the new generation of, or next generation, excuse me, of family members being on family boards. I know in some instances in our families, not only are these younger generational members on the family foundation boards, but they themselves are creating social entrepreneurship opportunities as well as engaging in social enterprise. So yes, I think that this is an exciting trend for the future.
Thank you. Thanks very much. We appreciate the Midwestern perspective. Very helpful.
Mary, you've served on the board of two very distinguished family foundations, and along with your nonprofit experience, and I'd like to turn to you for some questions about leadership. To begin with, your foundations have been very, very strategic, very candid about your efforts to engage both family and community members on the board, community members who are not related to the family. I'm really interested in how this has been important to you and how your composition of the board has evolved. But you've also, with at least one of the foundations, experienced a transition from a longtime CEO to a new one. So how have you thought about the roles of board and CEO, and how can families with paid staff ensure that productive board-staff relationship really exists well, even with and maybe because of a very strong and engaged board?
Sure. Well, and I think you alluded in your comments about how governance has become, paying attention to governance is a real trend that I think a healthy trend in family philanthropy. And I guess I would say, when I came into both the Babcok and the Reynolds Foundations, the boards have been about half family and half non-family for as long as I've known that. So that's the tradition that I was welcomed into. But what has really changed, I think, is the deliberate nature that we now bring to the governance process, just like I think any well-governed organization should. So when we are looking out to bring on new board members, we will talk with the board about what are some of the skills we want to bring on. Is there certain parts of either the state of North Carolina or our, in the Babcock Foundation grants throughout the Southeast, are there certain geographic areas that we need to bring on? Are there certain backgrounds or perspectives that we want to bring balance to the board? And then we have pretty extensive outreach to not just kind of say, well, who do we already know, but to talk to people that, and to bring on people that aren't already within our sphere. And we conduct interviews with those prospective board members to really kind of test the chemistry and the fit and their level of interest and willingness to work in what we're doing. And we're always trying to keep building a pipeline of possible board members. So I think that we've really, really grown our capacity in that area. And with this tradition of an engaged board, on both boards, but particularly at the Reynolds Foundation, over the years, many of our special initiatives have come from board members themselves who then work with staff to help flesh them out. So there's this really strong tradition of engagement, and even for better or worse, changing staff recommendations, changing committee recommendations when they come out. So I think that this level of engagement is certainly what has kept me on these boards and so enthusiastic about working with them for so long. But one thing that I've really noticed is as in both foundations, more strategic, as we work with more partners, as the work becomes much more complex on the program strategy, and it's not just about kind of reviewing individual grants, but it's really thinking about the whole portfolio of grants, how they fit together to really be sort of greater than the sum of just the parts. The board-staff relationship, I think, can sometimes get tense because it's not just a come in every couple of months for a meeting. It's really, staff is out convening. There's this constant learning going on, and so how you keep the board engaged and involved in that learning is challenging. And as staffs grow, I've also seen that, and as they get perhaps more specific or specialized in their program areas, there can be sort of a level of ownership over the program that is just a change. So some of the things that we've developed, you'll see on the next slide. On this slide. There's not rocket science, but they're working for us. So at the Reynolds Foundation, we have a committee for each of our focus areas. It meets monthly by phone, and it really is focused on deepening the program strategy and kind of providing a sounding board to the program officer, that has been really healthy. And I think it helps to develop the relationship with the staff person. And so we can kind of see how they think, and they can see how we think, and that's been really, really helpful. And at Babcok, we have a learning and partnership committee that helps plan. We have board learning at every single one of our board meetings, and so that committee helps to plan that based on board input. And then we also use it to keep up with existing and probably more importantly, prospective partnerships, because we found that sometimes the staff was getting out ahead of the board, and then the board's kind of like, whoa, we don't know that we want to go there, and the staff has already committed itself, and so that has been helpful. But I want to make the point that committees do not rule, and the full board often, the committee recommendations are a place to start. The board often changes and improves committee recommendations, so it's not that kind of like you can't change a committee recommendation. I think technology is an obvious way to help provide information. People can look at it on their own time, which has been important. And then to your point, quickly to your point, I did want to say transparency around conflicts of interest I just think is really, really important, so that it's not that there's this hidden question about, oh, I think you're on the board of that grantee organization or what. It's right there at the top of every grant recommendation, who's on what boards or what kinds of conflicts of interest might exist both for staff and board. And finally, to your point about leadership transition on the Babcock Foundation, we just have a new executive director who started a couple of months ago. And I think you have to make sure that not just that the person has the requisite set of professional skills coming in, but that there's kind of a temperament fit. And one example that I would use is we have just traditionally our staff head is the title is executive director. We have not gone to the chief executive officer route, and that is something that we talk about every time there's a leadership transition. The board still feels really strongly that that's kind of an example again of our chair of our board is the president of the foundation. And that, we had some candidates for the job who wanted to push on that, and you're kind of like, if the title is so important to you, this is not going to be a good fit. It was really, really important to us for incoming people to understand that there needs to be this balance, and really they had to be able to cope with a strong, opinionated board. So I think those are my comments.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Carrie, you serve as president of your Family Foundation, and in that work you've been granddaughter, daughter, mom, aunt, and now children, nephews, and nieces are all to prepare for their role to be part of the foundation. How has your family prepared for bringing the next generation on as leaders in the family philanthropy? How important has this been to your fellow board members, and how do you help them prepare for the need to balance personal interests and values with the notion of coming to the table around shared values and mission?
Sure. Well, we'll go to the next slide, and has a few facts about the Durfee Foundation just to give a little background. As you can see, we're a smallish foundation. We are regionally focused in Los Angeles, California. Our current board is all third-generation family members plus 2 non-family community board fellows. This is fairly recent, though. We have been a multi-generational family board working with the first, the donor generation, the second generation, and third generation all at the same time until fairly recently. So, so that's been what we've been doing, and I think we were somewhat ahead of the curve based on what Jenny said before about how families are now looking at multi-generations working together as opposed to the passing of the baton, in that I came on as the board president 20 years ago, actually, while my grandfather, the founder of the foundation, still served on the board, and the generation above me was also on the board. So this is something that we've been working with for quite some time. Currently, we have a number of younger family members who are interested in coming on, and as with many modern families, as you can see, the lines of the next generation are not neatly drawn. And let me go to the next slide, which shows that that my generation, the third generation, has a wide range of ages from 17 to 52. I actually have a first cousin who is younger than my youngest son. The fourth generation ranges in age from 1 to 23. So as you can see, it's not as clean as it might be in some families, although I suspect that this resonates with a lot of families. And we're not looking at people as representatives of generational tiers, but rather as individuals who may or may not be ready for engagement with the foundation in young adulthood. There are a lot of different approaches to bringing the next generation on. We've chosen, after a lot of discussion, to wait until people are in young adulthood to bring them on. And the Durfee Foundation looks at the foundation primarily as in service to the community, and secondarily as a vehicle for the family to work together. So people coming onto the board have to accept that framework, and we also look for family members who are interested in coming on the board as being able to really demonstrate their commitment to the foundation's mission. I'll go to the next slide. And Durfee's mission and programs have a strong identity. We focus, if you look at our mission statement on our website, we focus on supporting individual initiative and leadership, creativity, and risk-taking in Los Angeles. And within that, we have a number of programs that we've been dedicated to for quite some time. We offer sabbaticals for longtime nonprofit leaders. We offer sustained funding and mentorship for new organizations with strong leadership, and fellowships for cross-sector leaders to focus on solving intractable problems in Los Angeles. And even though we have a very solid framework for what it is that we do, it's you can tell that it's discipline agnostic. We don't focus on specific on medical research or children, youth, and families or environment, but a lot of our work encompasses all of those things. And Durfee trustees are encouraged to bring their passions to this mission. We're focused more on how we do the work than what the work is. And so we've had trustees who bring their own expertise and passions for the arts, for science education, gay and lesbian issues, and we've worked to develop programs in that way. We have a year-long onboarding process for family members interested in becoming trustees, and you can see the requirements. It's fairly rigorous, but I think what we're hoping to do is give prospective trustees a picture of what it's like to be a trustee, which requires a fair amount of commitment and a real dedication to the mission and goals of the foundation. We also want people who demonstrate a strong understanding of the nonprofit sector, either through volunteer work, board service, or other activities. We have pretty high standards, but so far it's worked out well that we are bringing on people who are very committed to the work of the foundation and to furthering our family philanthropy. And that's it for my section. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. Okay, we've now all had a chance to sort of answer some important questions and look back a bit. Let's give each of you a chance to look forward a bit. And before we open this up for our half hour of Q&A, I'd love for you to share with us one thing you'd hope for the field of family philanthropy for our next 15 years. Where do you see the field taking us in the future? And Tom, I'd like to start with you because one of my favorite memories of getting this all going was the trial and error, and you reminding me that we were building this plane while we were flying it. So, so I guess it's wonderful to have a chance to say, now that it's flying and this notion of support for family philanthropy is out there, what do you think? How have we come forward? What are you most proud of, and what are you looking forward to in the next 15 years?
Well, I think we had the right pilot. That helped. I think maybe what I'm most proud of is the success that you and all of those who worked with us, how successful they've been in getting a lot of hands on the wheels. I think there's been a rather broad ownership of the center and its work. And I think sort of pull together, maybe the thing I'm most proud of is that we've been able to establish that wealth sharing, and this is all about sharing wealth, that wealth sharing, well done, is an asset to be prized. I think we've moved from what sometimes may have seemed in the past almost a defensive position about family philanthropy to where we could declare that done well and done with respect for the broad spectrum of the wealth and lack of wealth of our country, that done well, this is a community of people and institutions that's an asset to be prized.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mary, if there's one thing you'd hope for the field for the next 15 years, what would that be? Mary?
I think you're on mute.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. I was saying brilliant things on mute.
Okay. Well, I'm sure you can recall every one of them.
Yes. I guess, so what I wanted to say is that every family philanthropy have a strategy for engaging with grantees and community stakeholders to listen and learn from them, and that does not mean having necessarily people on your board, although I see no downside to that. But I think that through advisory committees or grant review panels, or there's lots of different mechanisms that people can use. I think it's really, really important that family philanthropists get outside of what can sometimes be an insular world. And in preparing for this teleconference, I went back through the Knowledge Center, Jenny. You'll be very happy. And there was so much great stuff there. But I found this wonderful quote from Paul Ildesacker that I wanted to read that I think came from actually a previous webinar, but it's in the book that was about Paul Ildesacker that was edited by Jenny. And he wrote, "Follow both routes to understanding, the compassionate as well as the analytical. No one can comprehend the universe who does not understand and care for the sparrow." And I hope that family philanthropy can achieve that.
Thank you, Mary. Beautiful quote. Okay, Carrie.
Well, my hope for family philanthropy is it's similar to what Mary was just saying about families reaching out to the communities that they serve to discover what's truly needed, as opposed to cooking up their own ideas in their boardroom, talking to themselves. But then also I think family philanthropy is at its best when the family brings its own passions to the work that it's doing, but that they can find that sweet spot that marries the family's passions with the community needs.
Very nicely said. Thank you, Carrie. And Valerie?
Well, what I most hope for the future, and I see it really happening a lot, is that family foundations step up their involvement in collaborating with others, nonprofits and other funders. I'd say that 15 years ago or so when the center started, family philanthropies, particularly those that weren't staff, felt that they couldn't sort of hold their own in terms of collaborating with staffed foundations. But that's just not the case anymore. Whether they're staffed or not, family foundations are becoming just as strategic and just as interested in outcomes and just as knowledgeable about best practices, et cetera. So I just really hope that that continues and that they engage in funder collaboratives and cross-sector problem solving, and that they'll always be at the table in communities trying to affect important social change.
Thank you very much, Valerie. I know we want to get on to the questions. It's just about that time. So let me close, first of all, by thanking the four of you. I know Jason will, but there's a very personal, very heartfelt thank you from me for not only what you've brought to this webinar today, but what you've brought to the National Center and to all of the field of family philanthropy through your service and your guidance and wisdom. I want to close, I think it's sort of fitting. It's the last paragraph of the report that was written on the occasion of the 10th anniversary. And at that time, we were looking to better understand the value of family participation in democracy. And I had come across the sometimes infamous in our field, Alexis de Tocqueville, who was commenting on the early America tradition of private giving and voluntary service and wondering what was this and how did it help sustain this democracy, and was it, you know, smart or wise to have this being done independently? And one of the things he suggested was that it actually creates a superabundant force, those were his words, that has the power to produce wonders for our democracy. So let me reflect on that for just a second and read you that closing. For families of wealth, philanthropy provides a vehicle by which a matter of chance, the fact that people are related to one another, becomes a considered choice. It provides the means by which private good can be turned to public benefit. Family philanthropy is one of those points at which the principles of individual well-being and the common good do, in fact, merge. Thus, family philanthropy, as it adds value to the family and to the family's philanthropy, fraught as it may be with its own anxieties, is a vital part of democracy's superabundant force. Moreover, family philanthropy, as it pursues a vision greater than its growth for a community broader than its board, will continue to produce wonders for our democracy. And it is my great hope that we continue to produce wonders for all of you who are engaged in family philanthropy, and that the National Service continues to be, the National Center for Family Philanthropy continues to be of service and value to those doing this very special work. Jason, back to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Jenny, and thanks to all of our presenters today. We now invite all of you in the audience to take part in our open Q&A session, and a number of you have been sending in questions during the presentation, and many more of you actually sent some questions in prior to the call today. So we have a plethora of questions to get to. We'll try to get to as many as we can in the next half hour. If you have additional questions, you can use the question box of your control panel on the right side of your screen. Let's start with the first question for Carrie and Mary, I think. The question is, I see that the field of family philanthropy has a lot of room to evolve, but that progression is happening. I think strategic planning, giving for impact, and measuring impact of giving is increasingly becoming more central in family foundation activities. And I think this is a good thing. The funds and assets that were acquired by my grandparents, who started our foundation, followed a business plan and strategic growth. Why shouldn't the foundation operate in a similar way? Carrie, do you want to take a crack at that one?
Sure. I think I agree with the questioner that I do think that progression is happening in all kinds of ways, and I marvel at how this field has evolved in the 20 years that I've been involved in it. I guess, you know, the question at the end is, why shouldn't the foundation operate in a similar way? I have no reason why the foundation shouldn't operate in a similar way. I think that having a plan for all aspects of the foundation, whether it's governance, grant making, investing, is a smart way to proceed, and that should go ahead. The one caution that I would have, though, is to not suck all of the fun out of the Family Foundation by approaching it in a business-like way. I think that it's very important to be business-like and to have very high standards, but to recognize that family philanthropy, while it should be held to high standards, it also has a really special place in as I said before, about, you know, marrying the family's passions with the community needs, and that needs to have a place in the operation of the foundation as well.
Mary, do you have anything to add? Mary, are you on mute again?
Sorry, I'm on mute again. So I agree in general with the sentiment, and I guess what I would say, I think it's important to be thoughtful about the type of grants that you want to make, what the focus areas are, or what you think the anticipated impact might be, and how you will know the impact, and that this should be a collaborative process, not just, I don't agree with dividing up areas based on kind of just, you know, you take that area and we'll take this area. But I guess that where I take issue a little bit is one of the beauties of all philanthropy, including family philanthropy, to me, is to take risks and to do what other types of investors can't and don't have the choice to do. And so I worry that too much emphasis on strategic plans and measurement will inhibit philanthropists from taking on some of the big thorny issues like racism and poverty, or things like the arts or civic engagement or advocacy that may be more difficult to measure. So I think you want to be thoughtful about what you want to achieve and help you and your grantees know whether you're making progress against those goals, but not to kind of nickel and dime around measurement or be so caught, you know, prisoner of a strategic plan, I guess I would say. That's it.
Great, thanks. Next question, we had a couple of questions from people in the audience about collaboration. And let's start with Valerie on this one. Does anyone on the panel feel that the growing impact through collaboration is important to family philanthropy? And the other question is, does anyone have any good examples of where families have collaborated with others? Valerie, do you want to start on that one?
Sure. Well, I think my previous comments alluded to that. I think collaboration, whether for any kind of foundation, is just so critically important. Foundations have limited resources, and of course, private philanthropy's resources are dwarfed in comparison to the public sector's resources. But we're all trying to achieve very often common outcomes around very, very, very difficult social issues and social problems. So collaboration can really leverage resources, and not just the funders' resources. I think when I think of collaboration here, and when I think of some families that have done some very exciting collaborative work here in Chicago in neighborhoods, it's collaboration not just with other funders perhaps, and also with the public sector, but it's true collaboration also with nonprofit organizations. Bringing them in early on is equal thought partners, and achieving a common agenda with commonly derived outcomes. So I think the nonprofit partnership is an important aspect of collaboration.
Can I add something to that? This is Mary.
Please do.
So I agree with that, and also I think you can collaborate not just with, but with business and other organizations as well. And one example I would give is the Babcok Foundation has as a goal building up the capacity and number of community development financial institutions throughout the South, and went to the Federal Reserve in Richmond and has been partnering with them both on research and building capacity of those organizations. So there's lots of different, and we really leverage their intellectual resources almost more than their financial resources. And then one more thing I want to say is we all need to be followers sometimes as well, and because I think we all like to be leaders in the field, but when Babcock got into impact investing and mission-related investing, we deliberately said we do not have the resources to build up the staff capacity. We are going to follow and partner with others like the Heron Foundation that are really kind of putting all their eggs in that basket. So I think choosing when to be a follower and when to be a leader is an important idea within collaboration.
Great, thanks, Mary. Carrie or Tom or Jenny, anything you want to add to that? We have plenty of other questions to get to, so. All right, great. Let's move on to the next one. We have several questions actually that came in for Carrie, I think, related to bringing on the next generation. The first is, what is a reasonable age, do you think, for bringing in young family members to the board? And can you be more specific about young adulthood? And the next question would be, what is the geographic dispersion of your board and family members, and how does that affect your onboarding process as you described it? And the third, and I can remind you of these if you need it, is what is your nomination process for family board members, formal versus informal? Do they apply, or do you ask them individually? And how do you deal with, quote, rejecting family members who are interested in getting involved but do not qualify? Carrie, maybe you can start with that, and then if Ginny has any thoughts that she would like to add more broadly, that would be great as well.
Sure. Let's see if I can remember all of these. Well, the first one was about age, and I think that there's a variety, and I've talked with foundations that have had huge success having a program for children that starts to get the children acquainted from age 6 on, and they've had terrific experiences with that. We have taken a different tack in that we tend to reach out to people when they have finished college and have sort of gotten past the first couple of bumpy years of post-college. And but I'm not saying that that's the way that everybody has to do it. It just was the decision that we made, I think, mostly because of our focus on community first and the family vehicle second, but there are other foundations that might flip that and see the foundation as serving the family primarily, and then serving the community as a secondary concern. So I think it really depends on what you're trying to accomplish with involving next generation. I have seen it can sometimes backfire if people feel at a young age that there's this high expectation that they engage in the family foundation, and then they get engaged at a young age and might wake up a little bit later on and say, gosh, I've been doing this for so long, and it felt more like a directive from the generations above than something that they're coming to voluntarily as an adult. So that's where we're coming from, is we really want people to do it because it's what they want to do, not because they believe that it's what the family expects them to do. The second question was about, can you remind me?
Yes, it was about geographic dispersion and how that affects your onboarding process.
We do have geographic dispersion. The foundation is based in LA. Our giving is based in LA. I do not live in LA, and only 2 of our board members do. So, it's something that we take into consideration. We meet on weekends because people in my generation have jobs and aren't able to meet during the week, and we have to allow for people to travel. So it is something that that affects us as it does many other families. And then the third question, if you could also remind me of that one.
Yes, it's about what is your nomination process? Is it formal or informal? Do they apply?
Yeah.
And how do you deal with rejecting family members who may apply but do not qualify?
So we have an informal process. We put it out. We have the onboarding process that I put up on the slide is available to anybody who's interested, and we reach out to people who are age in the age range and who seem like they might be interested. We don't have some families have huge numbers of people who are eligible, and so they have to select from a large group. We haven't been faced with that issue. We have a fairly manageable sized group to work with, and so far we haven't had to. Well, actually, I have kind of had to reject someone, but it was able to do it in a way that was about time constraints and other things. So it hasn't really come up as a huge issue. It may in the future, but I think with our onboarding process, what that's designed to do is to give this year-long process of the prospective trustee being a part of everything and being to see for themselves whether they think that they would be able to add to it and fit in with it, and then for the rest of the board to see if that feels like a good fit. And so we're in that process now with some people, and it seems like it's going really well. And I would hope that if it's something that seems like it's clear that it really isn't a good fit, that it's clear from both sides. But we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. And but this gives a chance. I think it's easier to do this onboarding process rather than vote somebody on the board and then find out that they're not a good fit.
Great, thanks, Carrie. Ginny, I know you've done an awful lot of thinking and writing on this topic of eligibility and involvement. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, maybe just a different thought, because Carrie's covered the most important basics around something that works for your family, your goals, your circumstances. But one of the things I want to offer is, especially for those of you who are looking at age limits, whether it's a young age, you know, which you can come on, or whether it's a retiring age, or whether it's community members or family members, I'd like to suggest that something that might help free up your thinking and also free up some of the sensitivities is to think about this not in terms of age or gender or geography, but in terms of what expectations do you have for board members? What does that job description, if you will, look like? And then what would make someone eligible to fit that? Is it that they'll have the amount of time to come to meetings, that they have a thoughtfulness and a concern about community issues and circumstances? What do you really need? I mean, maybe in one family that a 22-year-old can offer that, and a 35-year-old maybe can't. So does age become restricting if what you really want to do is define the work and then find family members, community members, whoever it might be, that can help meet those expectations and do that work well? I think the more you can make, whether it's fund advisor or board member decisions based on principle rather than personality, the more likely you are to be successful, both as a philanthropy and as a family.
Great, Jeannie. Thanks so much. Next question is for Tom and Mary. The question is, the New York Times just wrote an editorial about the decline of North Carolina, including declines in public education, racial equality, and tax policy, including eliminating unemployment for 70,000 people. What's going on there, and what role do family philanthropies have to play in the areas of public policy and nonpartisan efforts to engage residents in the democratic process? Tom, do you want to take a crack at that first?
Well, I might say that Mary's down there and I've fled to New York State, but they have a critical role, I think. The danger is in any institution, including a state, is when all the questions don't get asked and all the answers are demanded. And I think foundations can, fully adhering to the legislative and regulatory prohibitions, I can still see that there is a full debate, that there's a level playing field if that's ever possible, that people who are voiceless are given a voice, and I think that's the role that some foundations play in North Carolina and will continue to play in North Carolina. And the reason why this will be viewed someday as simply a really bad experience in a much better history. But there's definitely a role for foundations to play in the whole area of public policy. It's something that Jenny will remember when the council some years ago created a committee just to look at whether or not that was a role for foundations to play. The Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation has actually been involved in public policy in some way in North Carolina since its first grant 77 years ago. So I guess that's my answer is that we're going through a very bad experience in our state in which I do not think the will of the people is being represented, and foundations will help ensure that that doesn't occur without somebody paying attention to it.
I will. This is Mary. I'll add two quick comments. One, I'll say that, so as Tom said, Z. Smith Reynolds has had a focus on public policy and civic engagement for a long time. And in fact, you saw a lot of the work of our grantees and successful work of our grantees in North Carolina having some of the most effective voter laws in terms of early voting and same-day registration, and in fact, we've had the greatest increase in voter participation in elections of any state in the country, I was told. So that, I I think, is a great example of some of the successes of our grantees. And what now, unfortunately, I think a reality that foundations have to deal with, and this is my second point, is the influence of money in politics and with the 501c4s and national money coming in, and that's just it's politics, and that's an area in which foundations obviously cannot operate and I think should not. But it's just the money that poured into North Carolina in 2010 to elect some very inexperienced and kind of reactionary politicians. This is, my personal opinion. You're seeing the evidence of it now, and hopefully, I believe enough in democracy that the ship will right itself over time. But it's sort of, inexperienced politicians gone wild is what you see, and decades of progress being rolled back, unfortunately. But there's just a limit of what foundations can do in that arena.
Great. Thanks, Mary. I know you have a lot to say on this topic.
Yes.
Let's turn to a slightly different topic, which is a couple of, actually, two questions which are, at first glance, not related, but I think you'll see that they are related in other ways. The first one is, what should we think about if we realize there will be no next generation to take over? And the second question is, please comment on length of terms of service and limitations we should have, if any. Ginny, would you be willing just to start on that, on one of those, one or both of those?
Sure. Can you hear me okay? There's some feedback on my line.
Yeah, I hear that as well.
Okay. Well, I'll quick press on. I'm on my third phone, but this is what happens when you're out on the lovely coast of North Carolina, I will point out. First of all, I think I've met a lot of families who have dealt with this very issue, that there may not be family willing and able to take this on. And I think there are a variety of options I've seen used very successfully. One is the notion of expanding the community board participation and ultimately having a community board. One is the notion of turning the funds over to a nonprofit, something you've really valued over time. In some cases, I've seen the community foundation where it had a historic geographic commitment that a fund was, established sometimes in the name of the founders to do that kind of giving. For some, obviously, a spending out process is an option. And I don't think, obviously, for spending out, I think the notion of a donor's legacy can still be very important to a foundation or that goes on. I think you can definitely have comments and values and mission from a founder that they're intended to guide the future of the foundation. I've seen that very successfully employed by some. But I was going to, the bottom line is you have a number of different options. And how do you work through those in a way, again, where you're the architect of the change, where you don't end up making a decision in response to some kind of conflict or catastrophe. You're doing what's in the best interest of the funds and the communities they were intended to serve. And there's lots of experience with that. And it's a great topic for us to think about going forward, to present some resources on how a variety of families are handling just that circumstance.
Anyone else want to add anything about that? All right, no problem. Let's go to another one. We have a couple minutes left for just a couple more questions. This next question is about international giving. Do you see a trend towards greater international or just domestic giving among next generation family philanthropists? If they are giving internationally, what is their level of knowledge about international issues? Anyone want to take a crack at that? Carrie or Valerie, anything you're seeing in your regions?
Well, here in Illinois or Chicago more specifically, we're definitely seeing a greater interest in the next generation's involvement in international issues. And interestingly enough, it may not always be manifested through the Family Foundation, but through their own personal giving and all the new online ways in which individuals as well as others can connect to causes anywhere in the globe. And if you've looked at the data from the Foundation Center in terms of giving, foundation giving over the last couple of years, one of the biggest areas of growth actually has in fact been in international giving. And I think a lot of that has been driven by the next generations. It's hard to say what their level of knowledge is, except it's such a small world now with the internet, and there's so many players actively engaged in social causes and addressing social problems globally that I think there is a fair amount of information out there.
You know, Jason, and one of the, well, maybe two of the things that I would say have also made this much more of an active part of family philanthropic giving. The first is just a simple recognition of global world. So even if you have an interest that's based here in the United States, it may very well be that you see implications in partnerships or lessons learned or the opportunity to build on your lessons that are beyond the borders. And the second thing that I think has also been a trend is the growth of some very effective intermediary organizations that make this easier for families to do. And you know, we've seen this grow up from some of the individual, you know, giving vehicles to, you know, to intermediaries that family foundations, family donor advised funds, and others can sort of latch onto and know you're working with a community of people doing responsible work in an accountable way that helps extend your mission beyond, you know, U.S. borders. So I think those intermediaries have played a role in exactly why this is happening in such a rich way. And I think, you know, the notion of an adventurous spirit, whether that's the next generation bringing this on because they see that global world differently or, you know, through a new set of eyes, or, you know, or whether it's others just willing to explore and learn, I think it counts for some of this as well.
Great, thanks, Jenny. Actually, the person who asked the question about terms of service and limitations pointed out that it was not answered. Carrie or Mary or Tom, any of the foundations that you've been associated with, do you have any kinds of limits on board terms?
This is Carrie. We have one-year terms for our trustees, and so and people can rotate off, can choose to rotate off and take a break from the foundation, or what happens most often is people choose to stay on and keep on going. We haven't, as I mentioned before, we don't have a huge number of people waiting in the wings to be on the Family Foundation board, so so we haven't had to confront the issue of needing to rotate people off to be able to bring on other people. I also serve as a non-family board member of the RGK Foundation in Austin, Texas. They have what I think is fairly typical of 3-year terms, which can be renewed for a second 3 years, and that's true of a number of nonprofit boards that I serve on. That seems to be the typical setup. I think, you know, as with many things with family foundations, it depends on what your needs are. For some people, they have a lot of people who want to serve on the board, and so they have to figure out how to create a fair system of terms so that the people who want a chance to serve can have a chance. For others, for some family foundations, they have dwindling numbers and are desperate to get people to serve, and so they have very different needs. So it really depends on what it is that you need to accomplish, and something that gets revisited because circumstances change. It doesn't have to be just because it's the way that you've been doing it for the past 35 years doesn't mean that that's the way that you have to keep on doing it. It's governance is something that always bears fresh looks.
Great, thanks, Carrie. Mary or Tom, real quick answer, do you have board terms and or do you recommend them?
Yes, we do have board terms, and we have a policy of rotating off for non-family members or community members, and then people can come back on after 1 year.
Great.
And then the only other thing I'll say is when we have 3-year terms, and when your term is up, we have a serious examination of whether you've been participating or not, so that there is some level of accountability. And we have not invited someone back.
Great. You know what? Let's end it right there. I think it's been a wonderful conversation. We have just a few seconds left. Valerie, I know you have to hit the road to get on a plane. Any last parting words, just a sentence or two that you want to leave the audience with today?
Oh, just engage. Engage with your nonprofit partners, engage with your colleagues in other philanthropies, and have fun while you're doing this work. And we all take ourselves so seriously, and it is serious work. But I think families have the ability to really make these foundations fun as well as strategic and impactful.
Mary, how about you?
Nope, I've talked too much.
Carrie, anything?
I second the motion for fun.
Tom, any last words today?
I think a brainless board would be a mistake. I think a heartless board would be a worse one.
Okay, thank you. And Ginny, as always, I'm going to leave the last words for you if you're still with us.
Oh, I definitely am here, but I'm still thinking about brainless and heartless, so that'll be with me for a while. that and being Noah. But anyway, I guess I would like to close with a thanks to all of you who are listening and all of those of you who have made those resources and publications and educational programs and everything that's been mentioned possible. This field would not have been born, and it would not have grown the way it has without the generosity of so many people. And I'm not referring, in this case, to the financial generosity. I'm talking to a generosity of spirit, a willingness to tell stories even when things didn't work out, and a willingness to offer support and an interview or fill out a survey because you think it might help someone else. And so I don't think we could close the celebration of 15 years without thanking all of you who have done just that so that these resources, these programs and services can exist. And to those of you who have been friends of the family, you know, to the National Center, a very special thank you, because you also appreciated that this doesn't happen without that kind of support as well. So although those of us who have been involved in this on a day-to-day basis have been, you know, so much a part of this call, you are behind so much of what we've talked about, and you are certainly the reason for it. So thank you very much.
Great. Thanks, Ginny, and thanks again to our wonderful panel, some of the greatest leaders in the field of family philanthropy and really some of the finest citizens of our great country. So thank you all for joining us today and all of your time getting ready for the webinar. As a reminder, for those of you with access to our online Knowledge Center, if you'd like to share today's discussion with your board or colleagues, both a webinar recording and a written transcript and slides will be posted in the Knowledge Center sometime next week. Please also keep an eye out for our participant survey, which will be sent later this afternoon. And finally, we hope you all can join us again in a few weeks on Thursday, August 8th at 12 noon Eastern, when we will feature the topic, Families and Community Foundations Working Together. Thanks again, everyone. It's been a wonderful 100th anniversary celebration of our Family Philanthropy webinar series, and we hope you can join us next month.